Hey everybody, thanks for coming back looking at a few more U.S. history notes. These notes are a little different. I'm asking you to not only look at my lecture in your book, but for sure use your textbook at least one page to research on Commodore Matthew Perry, also looking at our issues in Japan. Also, I'm asking you to look at another video on YouTube from the biography channel about Teddy Roosevelt as well. So you should pick up after the notes on Teddy Roosevelt and his biography. Then in your note guide. And we're going to start off talking about Asia a little bit. You looked at, in your textbook, hopefully looked at about Commodore Matthew Perry, how he went to Japan. And we also got involved in China, though, too. And at this time, China and other countries were trying, other countries like the United States, England, France, etc., were trying to get into China. China had this huge amount of goods, huge amount of people, and wanted a lot of trade there. Goods like porcelain, which is like you'll really find China, as you call it, plates, ceramics, those kind of things. Great tea, all those kind of deals. And so a lot of immigrants went there. Missionaries were sent to China trying to help convert China's population to Christianity. Now there's a group in China called the Boxers. They basically did not want China to have any kind of foreign influence. They feared that as the United States and Europe and other places came into China, they're going to change what China was all about. And so this group of Boxers in 1900 decided to attack all the people that were coming into China, and it's called the Boxer Rebellion. Well, some of the people that were attacked were United States citizens. And so the U.S. and Europe both sent troops to China to help try to fight against this Boxer Rebellion. Even in the picture, you kind of see Uncle Sam carrying, this whole little flag that says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness under treaty rights. And you see William McKinley here as they're going against the evil Chinese people, at least as they're shown here in this cartoon, because obviously they aren't really evil. You know what I mean. So the U.S. and Europe sent troops against the Boxers. They kill a lot of them. And in the end, after the whole kind of quasi-war is done, there's a trade agreement made with China, and it's called Open Door Policy. Basically, everyone agreed that China is not going to be colonized by anybody. The U.S., Europe, nobody's going to colonize China, but we have an open door policy with them, which means that anybody, doesn't matter who you are, can go and talk with China. Now it's reverberated back to the United States as well, as since the United States had what was called had the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. And so the United States, the nativism led to that issue here. Well, that led to more Japanese people coming to the United States, immigrating here. And a lot of businesses then would hire Japanese workers versus Chinese workers because, well, they felt they could pay them less due to the nativism and racism, all that kind of stuff existed around this time. The question then started rising up, well, we said no Chinese people coming to the country. Well, what about Japanese people? What about Korean people and other people from Asia? So a lot of questions arose about that. And should they, exclude Chinese people, Japanese people, as well as Chinese people and Korean people, and so on and so forth? Instead, this is a little later on, 1907, Teddy Roosevelt's president at this time. He makes what's called a gentleman's agreement with Japan. This kind of after all the issues with the Boxer Rebellion, all that kind of stuff going on, is that we actually make an agreement with Japan where we say, okay, the United States will not disallow people from Japan to come to the United States, but instead they're also not allowed to come here either, because we kind of said Japan's not going to let anybody come to the U.S., and vice versa. We kind of said that, you you can come, but Japan said no. Basically, it's kind of this little agreement thing that said, Japanese people aren't going to come here, but we don't officially say they can't. It's one of those little issues that come up in terms of kind of the whole policy with Asia. We'll talk a little about this in class, why it might be a big deal. Now, unfortunately for the United States, after the Spanish-American War is all done, William McKinley is reelected. And the guy they picked for his reelection was a guy named Teddy Roosevelt. And you remember him from the Rough Riders, all that kind of stuff. He had risen up, and he was a Republican who became governor of New York because he was so popular since he was a Rough Rider, all those kind of things. And Teddy was making changes. And Republicans thought that the vice presidency was the best place Teddy Roosevelt could be, because he always had a problem going along with the political bosses, the political gangs, if you will, the political machines. He wouldn't go along with them. And so Republicans said, okay, make him vice president, because really, in all reality, vice president doesn't do much unless the president dies. So you know what? Unless McKinley kicks a bucket, we're good. McKinley was a good man. He was really healthy, all those kind of things. Wouldn't you know it? President McKinley's assassinated. He goes and visits this place. This was the Pan American Fair, basically, in Buffalo, New York in 1901. And it was basically a big fair to show off all the lights and all the new gadgets and experiments and tools and all those kind of things the United States have been making. They basically lit up the entire fairgrounds of Buffalo, New York with these pretty electronic lights. all the new inventions, all that kind of stuff, including X-ray machines, all those kind of things. Well, at this big event here, William McKinley was known to shake a lot of hands. Okay, he's there September 5, 1901. He's shaking hands in this line. All the people line up long before the days of when the Secret Service would be patting everybody down, all those kind of things. Well, this guy comes up named Leon Czolgosz. This is this guy right here, and he was an anarchist. He had just heard speeches from Emma Goldman, other people who believed in anarchy, the idea that the government was doing things wrong, we had to get rid of them, and he really thought, based on all his speeches he'd listened to, that the government was rich and powerful and too much, all being used, all those kind of things. So Czolgosz comes up to McKinley in line, and he has this handkerchief wrapped around his hand like he'd got his hand injured, those kind of things. Wouldn't you know it, inside his hand is a pistol, a revolver. And as McKinley reached out to shake his hand, Czolgosz fires his gun twice, puts 2 bullets into McKinley's belly, and then he's wrestled to the ground, obviously, by the security and the police in the area and the people around him. Actually, it's kind of like the handkerchief actually catches fire from the muzzle flash. So it's, not really funny, but you know what I mean. One of the buttons is deflected off of McKinley's vest, but the other one enters into his stomach, and he actually lives 8 days. They rush him to the hospital at the fair, and the hospital, and this whole place is all lit up with all these lights, all those kind of things. What's really funny is that the hospital has no electric lights. They're holding up mirrors to shine sunlight into the wound. Now the doctor gets there, and they have an X-ray machine, an experimental X-ray machine at this exposition. They chose not to use it for fear of what it might do to the president. So this doctor sticks his finger into the wound, tries to find the bullet. Back then, guys, a belly wound was like a death sentence. Well, eventually, 8 days later, an infection develops in the wound. They think McKinley was doing better. All of a sudden, just like that, the infection comes in. McKinley dies, and, well, Teddy Roosevelt is now going to be the president. Later on, Czolgosz was arrested, and he was sentenced to death by electric chair at Sing Sing prison in New York. But now you have Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy, as the president. And you guys did his little biography before, and some of the cool things I like about him, how he was, this really sickly little child early on. He, did all the athletic things to prove doctors wrong. His heart supposedly was too weak, so he took up boxing and horse riding, all that kind of stuff. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt goes blind in one eye because he was still boxing when he was in the White House. Really cool, crazy guy. I mean, he had that horrible thing in his life where his wife and his mother died the same exact day. Goes out west, becomes a cowboy and a sheriff and a rancher. Comes back to New York, does politics. Goes and becomes a soldier. All those kind of things he does. But he really is. He's one of these guys like he doesn't follow the rules. That's why I like him. He's not a rule follower. And he basically did his own thing. When he became president, he was really interesting. Kind of funny things about him. He had a big family in the White House, and it went the first time he had little kids running around the White House, and he actually set aside playtime with his kids in the White House, so he'd be breaking up meetings to go play. Also, he had almost like a little mini zoo at the White House. These are all examples of pets that they had at the White House, and they would ride around and play with. Yes, he had a pet badger. How cool is that stuff, right? So it's kind of a crazy White House that way. Some issues that were coming up during Roosevelt's time in office were the Philippines. And McKinley, one of the things the Philippines did is after the Spanish-American War, the U.S. took control of the Philippines. And the Filipinos wanted independence. They wanted independence from the Spanish. Well, they didn't get it. U.S. came in, took over. They said, we want to have independence. McKinley says no. And make sure that that Philippines stay a colony. He sends 40,000 troops to the Philippines under the command of General Arthur MacArthur, who was actually a guy from Wisconsin, by the way. Well, the soldiers there trying to watch over everything, and eventually, somehow, a soldier gets shot, and war starts in the Philippines. It's not an official war, mind you, one of those little hush-hush wars. In the end, you have kind of a guerrilla war. The Filipinos were attacking, U.S. soldiers kind of, attack and sneak back in the woods, those kind of things back and forth. To kind of control that, the army there actually put the civilians, the Filipinos, into almost like a concentration camp kind of thing. Sometimes people were executed and shot. One of those little things that's kind of a black mark on the U.S. time during this period. The war was over by 1902, and the U.S. had full control of the Philippines, to put it mildly. Roosevelt does a couple of things to show off the U.S. power in terms of his imperialism and his foreign policy. One thing was called the Great White Fleet. He actually sent a whole fleet of battleships, led, believe it or not, by the USS Wisconsin. It had a giant badger on the bow or on the front of the ship, actually, where the USS Wisconsin had. They took all those ships painted in white, and they sent them around the world and said, hey, look at all this stuff the United States had. We have these big ships here. We are a very powerful group. Don't mess with us, basically what kind of said. And one of the things he did kind of show off the military power. Now, his foreign policy, he had kind of this thing he would say, which was basically speak softly, carry a big stick. Um, yeah, you don't have to go shouting everywhere how great you are. You can speak very softly. You can talk to people, negotiate, but make sure you have that military, that threat, that hey, we can do this stuff. As like your big stick, just kind of to warn people. You know what I mean? It's like in your back alley, you see a dude with a big old baseball bat or something. Oh, I don't want to mess with that guy. One of the things he does in the Western Hemisphere, for sure, is make something called the Roosevelt Corollary. Roosevelt, he wanted to make sure that Europe and other places stayed out of Latin America. And so he basically did a couple of things. The Roosevelt Corollary was added onto Monroe Doctrine, which basically said that the United States has the right and will intervene in Latin American countries if we feel the need to, and that European people got to stay out of it. The other thing we did, called dollar diplomacy, was we, pay off debts of South American countries owed to Europe. A lot of the Latin American countries were former European colonies. They owed money back and forth. We paid those debts off and got as friends. The biggest reason for this: keep Europe out of the Western Hemisphere. Basically, kind of saying, this is our hemisphere. You stay out. One place he really got involved here was Panama. Now, Roosevelt wanted to build a canal through Panama so we can get ships all over the world a lot easier. Before, he had to go all around South America. This way, you cut right through Panama. It would save months sometimes on ships, weeks on ships getting everywhere. Problem with this is that Panama at this point was owned by Colombia. Well, the Panamanians had wanted independence for a long, long time. And so Roosevelt decided, well, they should have it. And so Roosevelt backs the Panamanians, basically tells the Colombians, listen, you should really give Panama freedom. What he does, he parks a big old Navy ship right off the coast and says, okay, once again, do you want to give Panama its independence? And he kind of does. And the U.S. gets Panama. And as part of the deal here, the U.S. then got the rights to build and operate a canal in Panama. So the U.S. would basically own the canal. So in a way, he kind of uses that big stick policy, right? He goes, hey, Colombia, you want to give Panama its independence. And here's my big stick, my big old battleship saying, hey, make sure that you give them independence. And when we get Panama's independence, they say, sure, come on in and build a canal. We'll look more at the canal in class. We're watching a little video on it this week in class, but understand it takes 7 years to build this canal, millions of dollars to build the canal. A lot of problems were involved in this, things like disease, like malaria. The cost would overrun. It took a lot longer than it was supposed to. But they opened this thing up in 1914, and it was huge because it linked up the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, cut weeks off journeys from the Atlantic to the Pacific. It was giant, okay? And the thing is, the United States owned this canal. The U.S. owned it, and in 1977, we made an agreement with Panama that we would turn control of the canal over in 2000, and we did. So the Panama Canal has been owned by Panama since the year 2000, but we owned it from 1914 until then. And that's the last little thing we'll talk about there. Here's some cool pictures of the canal. This is the first image here of a ship going through the canal in 1914. Here's a picture of the construction. Here's what it looks like today. You can see, everything from a little ship to a big ship. Those kind of things can go through here. Here are the locks that raise and lower the ships. We'll take a look at some of the technology they used and actually compare it to some of the images of building the dam here in Prairie du Sac that we look at every day as well, because they're actually being built right around the same time. The last thing I want to talk about is one of the famous things that Teddy Roosevelt wins, and that is called the Nobel Peace Prize. Later on in Teddy Roosevelt's administration, Russia and Japan get in a war called the Russo-Japanese War. Basically, they fight over some small little islands. Well, Teddy Roosevelt steps in and brokers a peace, basically mediates the dispute, stops the war. And it kind of gets the United States involved in other politics. First time we kind of stick our nose in and help other countries to mediate a conflict. Well, after this, we do a lot more. So it kind of changes that precedent of what presidents do. And one of the things that he wins, he's awarded because of this act, is to give the Nobel Peace Prize. Basically, the biggest thing that he says that we brought, peace to the world. And so Teddy Roosevelt helps bring in the world into U.S. politics as well that way. Guys, I do like Teddy Roosevelt. He's one of the most polarizing figures I feel in American history. We're going to talk about more next week as we look at the progressive movement and see how he fits into this whole situation. So this week we'll talk about Teddy on Tuesday when these notes are due. We'll talk about the Panama Canal on Wednesday. We'll get into his progressive movement on Thursday. Thanks a lot, guys. Make sure you have your notes due for next Tuesday. See you guys then. Bye, guys.